Good morning, everybody. My name is Nathalie Paquet, and I will be your webinar moderator today. Welcome to our second 1010 webinar of this year. Today, we will explain you how CEN and CENELEC can contribute to the content of a standardization request, which were formerly named as mandates, all along the drafted phase, in fact. And to guide you through this process, I'm here with my two colleagues from the Industry, Technology and Infrastructure Unit, who are Catherine Vigneron and Gonzalo Ascensao. Catherine, I think that you are starting the presentation, so the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nathalie. Good morning, everybody. Today, we are going to explain how CEN and CENELEC contribute to the drafting of standardization requests. Our objective during this session is to convince you, national committees, technical committees, and experts that your involvement in the drafting process of a standardization request is crucial. In order to convince you, we drafted some slides and we divided our presentation in the following way. We will first briefly describe what a standardization request is, and if I may, I wish to remind you that we had a webinar in May 2015 on the standardization request topic as a whole, so you might find some information there. And we will then explain how these standardization requests are planned, or better said, where do they come from. We will then show where in the process CEN and CENELEC can intervene, and after having setting the scene, we will focus on the newly established body, the CEN and or CENELEC standardization request ad hoc groups. We will present their tasks, their membership and specificities, and we will conclude our webinar with some examples. Let's now start by reminding what standardization requests are. As you may know, standardization requests are defined by Article 10 of the EU Regulation 1025 of 2012 on European standardization. And these requests are requests from the European Commission asking to develop European standards in a specific area and in a specific time frame. In practice, the European Commission shall determine the requirement as to the content to be met and the deadline, and the European standards organizations are asked to draw up technical specifications meeting the requirements. It is to be noted that standardization requests, previously called mandates, are now issued by means of a Commission implementing decision. But still, they keep the usual numbering, which is M/ and a number. By accepting the standardization request, CEN and CENELEC commit themselves to publish clearly identified deliverables meeting the requirements mentioned in the standardization request, and this in line with the agreed deadlines. Also, if CEN and CENELEC want to ask for union financing, they should respect in their funding request the deadline of the standardization request. It means that no postponement of the deadline is possible if funding is asked. Standardization requests are initiated by European Commission services, usually the vertical unit in charge of a specific topic, and this in close collaboration with CEN, CENELEC, and let's see. We'll see that a bit later. It is also to be highlighted that the European Standards Organization are given 1 month to reply on the acceptance or not of the standardization request. It is therefore crucial and very important for CEN and CENELEC to influence or contribute to the content of the standardization request during its drafting phase. It means before its finalization. Now, coming to the planning phase of a standardization request. The European Commission undertakes forward planning of possible standardization requests. This is set out in a document called the Annual Union Work Programme for European Standardization. This Annual Union Work Programme identify strategic priorities for European standardization, reflecting the policy objectives set by the Commission. This document indicates the European standards and deliverables that the Commission intends to request from the European Standardization Organization. It is also important to mention that CEN and CENELEC are consulted by the Commission when the Commission is drafting this annual Union Work Programme. Everything outside the Union Work Programme for European standardization, is to be considered as an urgency and is to be avoided. Now, in terms of drafting standardization requests, the Commission coordinates the overall process of drawing up standardization requests, from planning to final notification. It means that the European Commission is responsible for the final content of requests. Nevertheless, in the preparation phase, the standardization request is drafted by the sectorial unit in the Commission, but this in full consultation with the European Standards Organization. Indeed, in accordance with the EU Regulation 225 of 2012 on European standardization, the Commission has to consult the European Standardization Organizations. This is a very important phase in the drafting process in the sense that it is exactly where the European standards organizations are able to influence the content of the standardization request. So there's no need to say that contributing to the drafting of the standardization request, of course, maximizes the likelihood of having the standardization request acceptable and that the execution deadlines are realistic. So we need the contribution of our members at this stage. Just to show you where CEN and CENELEC intervene in the complex preparation process of a standardization request, there's this small diagram. I will not go into detail because the process is quite complex, but there are one important phase where the standardization organization can intervene. It's in orange. It's at the informal stage. Now, I will give the floor to Gonzalo, who will explain you our new body, the Standardization Request Ad Hoc Group.
Thank you very much, Catherine. So I will continue and give you some background on how and why these ad hoc groups have been established and how they will work in the future. So essentially, as you can see in the slide, CEN and CENELEC technical boards accepted in 2015 initially the setup of a pilot ad hoc group for urban ITS, which main objective was to collect the comments and consolidate the CEN and CENELEC position on that specific standardization request. And so essentially this is the main role of these ad hoc groups, is to coordinate the CEN and CENELEC position and to provide this input into the European Commission standardization request. Essentially, when we establish these groups, we ask CEN and CENELEC members and all the technical bodies or stakeholders involved for their comments and possible proposals for change in the standardization requests. This ad hoc group is essential to consolidate our position and to have a common and strong position towards the European Commission. What has been decided as well as is that these ad hoc groups should be established as soon as we receive a first draft of the standardization request, so that to be involved as early as possible in the process. These ad hoc groups will work mainly through web conferences and using CEN and LiveLink or the CENELEC collaboration tool. So who is participating in these ad hoc groups for the standardization request? So usually when we send the document to both technical boards, we invite the CEN-BT members or the CENELEC permanent delegates to register themselves or someone on their behalf to this ad hoc group. Additionally, also partner organizations, also liaison organizations can be involved. We will also contact the technical bodies that are in the scope of the standardization request if we are aware of any technical body, and if there is also a sector forum, we will also involve the sector forum participants or someone representing the sector forum in this ad hoc group. Additionally, there has been also a CEN and the CENELEC BT decision in this respect. ISO and IEC should also be contacted and as far as possible involved since the beginning. So we also have a list of the ISO responsible program manager for each technical body in ISO, and we also have a contact point in IEC to which we will address as soon as we receive a new draft standardization request. Occasionally, and if necessary, we may also involve a Commission representative in order to clarify possibly the scope of the standardization request, or if there are questions to be addressed. In this respect as well, the ad hoc group will have a secretary from CCMC, and usually will be the program manager that is in the area of the standardization request that will be handling the secretary of this ad hoc groups. Now, more concretely, what are the tasks of this ad hoc group on standardization requests? So, essentially is to have a look at the technical content as such. What is the aim of it? So, what are we being asked for developing with respect to standards? Also, the time frames and the deadlines for the achievement of those European standards or other European deliverables. Which resources do we need? So, which technical bodies may be affected by this standardization request? Do we need financial support? Do we have all the resources that are necessary to do the work? Is there a need for a collaboration between CEN-CENELEC and possibly also ETSI, or eventually at international level with ISO and IEC? As you know, in certain cases, CENELEC is pretty much closed with IEC, and CEN with ISO, so there are several common technical bodies, and in certain cases the work is done in parallel. So this is also important to take in consideration when we discuss the standardization request. One of the most important tasks of this ad hoc group is also to consolidate the CEN and CENELEC position. As you may be aware, in certain occasions we may have different set of comments from different members or different stakeholders, and so it's important to discuss those divergent opinions and consolidate this in one single and agreed position. Also, the outcome of this ad hoc group is to propose to both technical boards if we are going to accept at a later stage or to reject the standardization request. Obviously, we don't have yet much experience with ad hoc groups, but we also have experience with old mandates, and we are now starting this setup of these ad hoc groups. There are a series of points that merit some attention when discussing the content of a standardization request. So, in the vademecum for European standardization, there is reference to ancillary preliminary actions of standardization, which means that those are not directly referring to development of European standards. In principle, those aspects should not be the only objective of a standardization request. This means that we can have, in certain cases and exceptionally, the request for a work program or for some preliminary work or a study, but this should not be the only aim of a standardization request. So this is an item that should be emphasized and taken into consideration in this ad hoc group. Obviously, in terms of time frames, the ad hoc group should really focus on the guidelines for the work, and whether the technical bodies that will engage in the technical work will be able to respect the proposed deadlines. And I will come back to this in the next slide. technically, we also have to be sure that what will be asked is exactly what we are supposed to do. So if there are questions about what is essentially the technical request, those should be questioned and those should be clarified in the standardization request. The collaboration with ISO and IEC is extremely important, because if we are aware of these possible collaborations and if some of the work will be linked to the international activities, we need to be sure that in respect of time frames, coordination of activities, we will be on the safe side if we later on would accept the standardization request. One of the objectives is, of course, to ensure that the work program in reply to this standardization request is feasible. It's extremely important that whatever we accept in respect of a standardization request will always be able to deliver to the European Commission. More recently, and in respect to facilitate, to improve the speed, both technical boards have also taken decisions emphasizing that as much as possible a work program should be available during the development phase of the standardization request, and as far as possible that draft work items should already be proposed for BT acceptance when the standardization request is also accepted by both technical boards or at that time. An important point is also that if we will need financial support, this needs to be also taken into account during the standardization request development. So essentially, the financial support will not be a precondition for the acceptance of the standardization request. So the financial support can only be a tool to support and to facilitate the achievement of the technical work. On the CEN side, there is the CEN BT Working Group 217 on the prioritization of the funding requests. And so whenever there is a need for funding, this BT Working Group needs to be asked for permission, and there are several templates that need to be fulfilled and submitted to the technical board. And once again, as I would like to emphasize that even if we are going to request financial support, we need to take into account the time frames for it, and all this process should be done in parallel. Now, a few examples concerning the standardization requests. In the current slide, you will see basically the end result. So, a standardization request will be a Commission implementing decision, so a legal act, and therefore we need to consider that if this is a legal act, we need to fulfill the request. Concerning the activities of the ad hoc group, as I said, the time schedule is extremely important, because we should ensure that if this time frame is established in the standardization request, we should deliver the standards in line with that time frame. So, and you can see an example here where there was a clear deadline for standards to be adopted by December 2017. This next slide also shows you the technical details of a standardization request. So in certain cases, the standardization request is very detailed, and as you can see, is asking for specific test methods or procedures to assess technical parameters in products. Finally, in all standardization requests, you also find a final table that essentially is putting clearly what is the request. So you will see on the first column is referring which is the expected outcome, so a European standard, and in the second column you will see the deadline for adoption. Those are the deadlines that we should fulfill.
Yeah, and now to close our webinar, I just wish to repeat the key learning points that we have explained to you today. So yes, the involvement of the European Standards Organization is crucial, because it is at this stage that CEN and CENELEC can shape the standardization request content. Also, as highlighted by Gonzalo, financial support cannot be a precondition to accept a standardization request. The deadline cannot be postponed. And the deadlines and work program mentioned in the standardization request have to be respected. And of course, the idea behind the ad hoc group, is that the ad hoc group process will increase the likelihood of the standardization request acceptance.
Just to remind you that for the next webinar, the topic will be quite complementary to the one of today because it will be on the CEN-CENELEC response to the standardization request once we have received it. Of course, we will look forward to welcoming you in April. Well, I think that we can just close the webinar of today, and we will look forward to welcoming you again in April. Bye-bye.
Bye.